We're having a conversation for everybody, but it's about women and then the rest of us. And this conversation for me is with two amazing women. One, former president of Mauritius, and I did stalk you for a long time from the moment you featured on Forbes Africa, Dr. Amina Greb Fakim and Dr. Wanjiro Kamal Rotenberg. I'm the only one without the title, but give me 4 years. Just give me 4 years. Don't worry about it. And, you know, we're having the conversation on women, on leadership, and what it matters for all of us and Africa. But I want to bring the men into this conversation. And my heart breaks slightly when I realize that, you know, if Wangari Maathai was alive, she'd be sitting there asking us, are you guys still having this conversation? How? After everything I've done and everything I did. But Your Excellency, you alluded to this, and I want us to go a little more into this. I know in retrospect, when I look back to everything I can do, and the fact that, and I said this to Dr. Joyce Banda, there are people who think that my confidence is arrogance, and they don't know where that comes from. And I realized it actually comes from the fact that my father's my biggest cheerleader. My mother's a great support. I mean, she's like, nah, you can do it. My father's like, no, you can do more. But I know without a doubt, if it wasn't for the men in my life who said you can, who never gave me a chance to question my ability, chances are I wouldn't be here. And I don't know whether this is true for you.
It's true for me on both counts. My mother was a very intelligent girl, when she was growing up, a very intelligent woman, and she was not given the opportunity to go to secondary school.
Wow.
Yeah, because at the time when she was growing up, it was not done. Girls simply didn't get education. But being an intelligent woman, she knew the transformative possibility that education brings.
Yes.
So I remember when I would come home after school, she just dropped my bag then to go, playing. She called me, she says, here, come here. Do you want to be doing what I'm doing like this for the rest of your life? Yeah. Just washing up and cooking and doing nothing else? So she looked at me in the eye and said, go back there and start working. So I did. And when I was having this conversation with my father, he was a very enlightened man because he was very much in the philosophy of you educating a girl and you educate a family and a society and a country. So he would keep telling me that you can do anything. And he was always giving me choices. That is also fundamental because I was growing up I'm a Muslim, growing up in a very conservative society. Can you imagine, Karen, I was there growing up in a village. I had never left the country, and he took me to the UK. Yes, I took the plane for the first time when I was traveling for my studies in 1979, and he came with me. And he always told me, you can do anything. And this, I'd like you. This is part of what is perceived to be my arrogance or my confidence, because I was taught from a very early age that I could do anything. And this is despite the fact that a career guidance officer were telling me all the time, you can't do science for boys. And yet I was doing it. I was fascinated by sciences. There were some landmark moments like the moonshot moment that really tilted it. And the second moonshot moment was there was the birth of a test tube baby Brown.
Yes.
So I thought, wow, if science can do. So I just went ahead and did. But at the end of the day, the change could have happened only from within the family.
True.
And this is where having a conversation with your father, your brother, your uncle, and having that support from home. As I keep saying, my mantra has been, even at presidency, changes will happen one family at a time.
I believe you. And, she said something interesting about secondary school. My mother told me something the other day, when she chose the name for my son. She said, the reason he'll be named Kimeu is that my brother, who he's named after, is the person who quit school in Form 2 so that I could go to school. There's a man somewhere saying go for it. And I don't know what it is like in your world, but in her world and mine, it's just that. It started at home. For my mother, it was a brother who quit school so that she could go to school. Because her father had said there's no money to educate the girls. Her brother said, nah, I'm done. I'll go look for a job. You go to school.
No, it's really powerful. And how can we aggregate those stories into a broader, and I want to say continent-wide conversation that invokes, that calls up a new masculinity? a new. There was in the past for this continent a masculinity that was needed to fight against colonialism.
Yes.
And we are, I think, at a moment in history, as a continent, as a country for sure, at a moment that calls for a masculinity that is about healing and building. And yes, there's a conversation that women need to have with women about our issues with each other.
With each other, yes.
But there's also a huge gap, a huge need for men to build a generation of young men whose focus is not on the violence that destroys, but on strength that builds and heals.
Yes.
And so for too long we've thought that the work of healing our societies, of allowing ourselves to benefit from women's leadership is the work of women. There's a huge role and a huge hunger and need for men to step into their strength of leadership. And so it's a whole redefinition of what it is to be a man.
But it's also very possible. I mean, we're not talking about strangers from Mars.
The thing is that you see there's something which is again fundamental, is economic. I mean, if you look at the US, what they've done when they took the decision to educate girls and to make access to education possible for girls, they've seen the GDP increasing.
Of course.
And so the percentage point of having an educated workforce, we've shown it at a very small scale when education became free in 1976. When before this, it was a question of parents who could afford to pay. But as from the moment that education became free and the parent didn't have any choices to make for educating girls and boys, we saw what we did in terms of transforming our economy. So the same girls who were cutting sugarcane fields could now manipulate machines in the factories and then move on to the IT and all the rest of it. So at a very micro level, we have been able to do that. But there are other things that we also need over and above the family. There's the policy. But there is also something which is again something which is very, very important. Provision of social safety nets. This is something that we don't seem to appreciate. But countries that have made advances, they are precisely these countries that have taken all these on board. So women who are widowed, girls who are deprived, these are girls who need to be taken care of by the state as well. So this is a conversation we need also to have, because unfortunately we tend to push this to the corner, but it's not. This is a global issue that we need to bring on board so that as a society, as a country, we nurture these women at all levels.
At all levels.
That social safety nets, we often forget that a lot of our women across the continent, certainly in this country, are locked in unpaid care work, which has huge economic implications. When you have a whole parallel economy that is mostly female, that's mostly around care work, that doesn't get paid, that doesn't get captured in GDP, which there's tremendous economic inefficiency. We call it culture, we call it our traditions, but put down on paper, if you actually do the math, it's tremendous economic inefficiency. And it has implications for our ability to break out of poverty. It has implications for Vision 2030, for Agenda 2063, and needing to move the unpaid care economy into
the main.
And the informal economy, for that matter, because women tend to be involved more on the informal economy, which again is huge in Africa. But yet, officially, we know that, for example, intracontinental trade is happening at 19%. But if you look at the other issue of in the informal economy, where women tend to be in,
women are trading
across borders. Across borders.
And because what we've done is countries, by failing to recognize women's role in these informal and unpaid care economies, you then fail to develop strategies to strengthen those parts of the economy so they actually benefit the country as a whole. And so
what the ladies are saying is, you're looking for more money, bring in more women. Yes, because you can only, when you reach your ceiling,
well, I will bring something which is more womanly. Bring something more womanly. How do you actually boost up the economy? You increase spending.
Yes.
And how do you increase spending better than giving the woman the ability to go shopping?
Exactly. how do you do? And you know, one day she'll tell you her shopping story. Apparently, that's one of the reasons they decided they didn't want her around. However, I do want you to subscribe, you know, take a sip and think about the men who have gotten you where you are. Is it a brother, a father? I've always said one of the funniest things about my career is the fact that, and this wasn't tokenism, is the fact that at 25, when I was asked to be, you know, the senior presenter at Kiss 100 at the time, and I always, when I can, I say, you know, God bless Ezra Bunyanyezi and Kiprono Kitony and William Pike and Patrick Kwaku, who were asked by everybody, she's 25 and under 30 and female. How are you ever going to give that amount of power to her? And I know years later, they're like, and she made us a lot of money. They did not lose anything by putting their weight behind me.
Yes.
My father didn't lose anything by putting his dreams on me. And when you look at Malala, who was the person who said you can go to school? She goes everywhere with her dad. She goes everywhere with her father. So you don't have to look very far to see what happens when the conversation that men have with themselves about women changes, and when men step into the gap and propel their daughters forward, and their wives, and in the case of my mother, their sisters, because it was her brother who stepped out of the way and said, you go to school, I'll be fine. So think about it. This conversation we're having, and probably what was missing in Beijing, was also telling guys, you really need to play. You really need to play. Take a break, I know. That's a lot to digest. When we come back, I think what I'm going to ask both of you is to tell me what you know without a doubt got you here. Got you here. All right? Subscribe.